What if Obi-Wan killed Darth Vader? In A New Hope, Obi-Wan fights Vader on the Death Star, seeing his old friend for the first time in a decade. When Luke and the others were in danger, Obi-Wan sacrificed himself so that the heroes could escape. However, what if this wasn't the case? And what if Obi-Wan actually killed Vader during this confrontation? How would that change the Star Wars timeline we all know and love today? Let's begin today's story during the events of A New Hope, when Luke, Obi-Wan, Han and Chewie arrive at the Death Star. The story would follow suit until Vader senses his old master and tracks him through the space station where they would eventually come in contact. Vader was furious to see his old master, but also, he knew that he had an opportunity to redeem himself. The last two times they had fought, Vader had lost, and it was like Obi-Wan was his kryptonite. After exchanging pleasantries, the two would ignite their lightsabers and attack. Vader fought a lot more timidly on the space station compared to the plains of Mustafar or even their Avatar-like fight on the barren moon. Going into this fight, Obi-Wan knew he wasn't the same man he was 10 years earlier. The sands of Tatooine had aged him, and he knew that compared to Vader, who had been training relentlessly, well, he would be in trouble. However, Obi-Wan notices how cautious Vader is, and he takes advantage of this. He begins to take risks, and despite leaving himself open as they fought, Vader wasn't capitalizing. Therefore, Obi-Wan channels all of his Force power and goes on the offensive, switching from Form 3 to Vader's familiar Form 5. This causes Vader to go on the back foot, and before long, he was struggling. Vader tried to turn the tide of the fight, but after overextending a strike on Kenobi's stomach, Obi-Wan moved to the left and struck at Vader's arm, causing the cybernetics to spark. Vader then stumbled, and Obi-Wan pressed forward even harder, throwing one wild strike at his old apprentice's chest, and it was done. Vader was dead. Obi-Wan looked down at his old friend and sighed. This wasn't easy for him to do, and he had struggled in their previous two outings to bring himself to kill him. But this time was different. This time he had Luke and Leia on the space station as well, and letting Vader live would severely risk the children's future. And so, Obi-Wan goes back to the Millennium Falcon at the same time Luke, the rescued Leia, and others arrive, and they all leave the Death Star, hitting hyperspace. From here, the heroes travel to Yavin 4 where they officially join the rebellion. Obi-Wan was greeted by a mixture of feelings. Some praised the once great Jedi for joining their cause, reminiscing the days of the Old Republic when the great Jedi General of Obi-Wan Kenobi was an infamous Jedi. He was also known as the Master of Anakin Skywalker, who was arguably the most powerful Jedi of his era, though none of them would know the treacherous man he turned into. However, there was also a significant number of rebels who held a lot of disdain for Kenobi for quote-unquote doing nothing all of these years. Despite this, they all realized that Obi-Wan is their last hope. Kenobi would join the Starfighters as they attacked the Death Star and successfully destroy it, winning a first and decisive victory against the Empire. Following this victory, the rebels begin to trust Obi-Wan more and trust his instincts. Over the coming months, support for the rebellion skyrockets across the galaxy, and for the first time, people begin to see that the Empire isn't invincible, and Palpatine isn't invincible. Rebel skirmishes and missions continue to poke holes in the Empire all throughout their territories, sort of like what we saw in Star Wars Rebels, how there were just numerous different missions that upset supply lines, overrun key areas like Lothal, and so on and so forth. So from here is when the story really begins to change from the original timeline. With Obi-Wan still alive, he can be around to help train Luke in the Force, but more importantly, he makes a decision that could make things worse or better. As Luke, Leia, Han, Chewie, and Obi-Wan traverse the stars, Kenobi pulls Luke and Leia aside. He struggles to tell them what he knows, but also believes it's the right thing to do. Luke senses that Ben is uneasy and asks what's wrong. Obi-Wan says there's something they ought to know, something that will change this entire fight for them. He says it was decided long ago to keep them in the dark for fear of upsetting the children, that they still deserved as normal a childhood as possible. Obi-Wan keeps switching eye contact between them, not knowing who to focus on. He looks down and shuts his eyes as he begins to recall a story that sounded like a myth. He details Anakin's life, from being discovered by Qui-Gon, his life as a Jedi, and falling in love with Padme. Luke began to shift in his chair, more interested and excited that he was learning about his father. For 20 years he had begged Owen and Beru to tell him any stories, but they would never budge. Leia, on the other hand, had no clue that this Anakin Skywalker was her father and was slightly confused about why she was in the room. But then Kenobi's voice began to break as he recalled how Anakin fell to the dark side, how he destroyed the Jedi Temple, killing all of his friends and family in the Order. He said that Anakin became Darth Vader. Luke became frozen in place. What? He thought to himself. His father turned evil? But how? No, this can't be right. Obi-Wan then tells them both that before Padme's death, she gave birth to twins, who she named Luke, and the other one was called Leia. Luke and Leia both looked at each other with a blank expression. They were shocked. Obi-Wan then said that they needed to make a choice, that he will be going to find Master Yoda, who instructed him, and there they will train to defeat Sidious. Luke immediately said yes, but Leia, she was hesitant. She said that the Force and lightsabers wasn't her, it wasn't her fight. She truly believed that she would better serve the rebellion by helping with strategy, leadership, and being a beacon of hope. Obi-Wan understood, but before he and Luke left, he looked Leia in the eyes and said that she was so like her mother, and that both Anakin and Padme would be proud of her. Luke and Leia then left for Dagobah, where they found Yoda and began Luke's training. This training was unlike anything Luke had ever experienced. The combination of Yoda and Obi-Wan was probably the best training Luke could have ever received. Yoda focused heavily on trying to rebuild Luke's teachings. As a traditional Jedi, he hated the fact that Luke was starting when he was 19 and believed that his age fundamentally altered the course of his training. Just like with Anakin, Luke had many attachments, so Yoda tried to teach him to unlearn what he had already learned. Obi-Wan, on the other hand, focused on Luke's power. They would spar together with training sabers for hours on end. As time went on, Luke became very powerful. At night, Obi-Wan and Yoda would reminisce about the old days, about the Jedi and the amazing family they had at the Jedi Temple. Luke was told stories from the Clone Wars and of Anakin's heroics before he turned to evil. As the weeks turned into months, Luke's power grew exponentially. By the time of The Empire Strikes Back, Luke had already been on Dagobah for a year, and so he was far more powerful than he was in the original timeline. But he desired to get back into the fight. He felt as though by staying on Dagobah, he was abandoning the rebels when they needed him most. But his masters couldn't disagree more. One day, whilst training on Dagobah, Luke felt the pull of the Force. He followed his senses as it led him to the cave on the swampy planet. It was there he was greeted by the projection of his parents, Anakin and Padme. They were standing together, holding hands. Luke smiled as he thought about what could have been, but then the projection collapsed and Anakin's soft smile turned into burning rage. He raised his hand and choked Padme through the Force, dropping her to the floor and seemingly killing her. Luke gasped and ignited his newly constructed green lightsaber. Anakin and Luke fought as the younger Skywalker realized the immense power his father had. This being was unstoppable, and it was no wonder the Jedi Temple fell. But then Anakin's projection began speaking to him, telling him that his destiny is to complete his work, to join the Sith and bring order to the galaxy. Anakin's figure slowly turned into Vader, and his saber became red. They continued fighting until Luke found an opening and sliced Vader's head from his body. The helmet exploded to reveal Luke's face. Was this his destiny, he thought to himself? No, it can't be. His destiny was to ensure peace and happiness for the galaxy. As he stood there panting, Yoda was perched on a tree stump beside him. He congratulated Luke on maintaining his composure. He said that most Jedi, like his father, would have lost control and been consumed by fear. Yoda says that he has passed his Jedi trials, that now Luke is a Jedi Knight. Meanwhile, the events of The Empire Strikes Back continue as usual. The Battle of Hoth happens and the rebels closely escape destruction. And more importantly, Leia, Han, and Chewie travel to Cloud City to get the Falcon repaired. Just like normal, Luke senses that his friends are in danger and he begs to leave to help them. But this time, with Obi-Wan there in person, they are able to convince him to stay, that his training is all that matters for the galaxy. In the original timeline, Vader was waiting for them, but this time, Emperor Sidious himself was there. After Vader's death, Sidious knew that he had to take a more hands-on approach until the war between the Empire and Rebels was won. When Sidious meets the heroes, he instantly sensed that Leia was strong in the Force. Consequently, he conducted a midi-chlorian test, discovering that her M count rivaled that of Anakin Skywalker. Palpatine practically went into a frenzy. He ordered a full investigation into Leia's heritage, where he learned that she was adopted into the Organa family shortly after the rise of the Empire. The reason that he knew she was adopted was because there was no record of Bria, Bael's wife, ever being pregnant. This confirmed it for Palpatine. Leia Organa was Anakin Skywalker's offspring, alongside Luke Skywalker. Sidious therefore leaves Cloud City with Leia. For the others, Han was placed in carbonite and sold to Jabba, and Chewie is sent into slavery like all the other Wookiees in the Empire, and Lando simply stays loyal to the Empire. This defeat was a huge loss for the rebellion. Sidious brings Leia back to Coruscant, where he begins to corrupt her mind. He infests her pure heart with the most darkness possible. Just like he did to Anakin, he begins giving her repeated visions, reliving the destruction of Alderaan, showing her visions of Luke dying, of Kenobi being captured and tortured, anything and everything that would bring her to the dark side. Simultaneously, he begins training her in the ways of the Force. She grew to learn how to levitate objects, to use her senses. Her training was far more akin to how Maul was trained compared to Anakin, and that she was tortured with Force lightning and learned through physical conditioning. Over time, she grew very powerful. Palpatine didn't shy away from instilling in her all there was to know about the Force. With Leia's capture, it meant that only Luke, Obi-Wan and Yoda remained for the Empire to win the war. With all the Jedi defeated, mere rebels would stand no chance against Palpatine's might. Sidious sends probes to all corners of the galaxy to search for them. This was his last quest. Thousands and thousands of probes were sent to all systems, and now he just had to wait. Leia quickly fell into evil, and her situation became the only reality she remembered. Palpatine unlocked the Chosen One gene in a way that he had hoped to do with Anakin before his defeat on Mustafar. Sidious gifted Leia the Kyber crystal of Mace Windu to bleed, which she did with ease. As the probes searched, Palpatine sent Leia on various missions across the Empire to squash insurgents and make herself known to the citizens of the galaxy. After months of searching, the probes made their way to Dagobah, where a full image of Obi-Wan, Luke and Yoda was captured. Whilst Kenobi quickly used the Force to destroy the probe, they knew they would be receiving visitors very soon. Accordingly, Sidious takes his apprentice immediately, descending on Dagobah with the Imperial fleet waiting in orbit. The Jedi had anticipated to see Sidious, who stepped out of the Imperial shuttle first, but behind him walked a female wearing a hood and dark robes. She lifted the hood as she approached to reveal Leia. Luke's emotions instantly rose, and he stepped forward a few steps, reminiscent of Anakin's emotive attitude, but Kenobi steadied him. The Emperor laughed, saying he found her in such desperate need of purpose, so he remade her. He sent her so far into the dark side, there would be zero chance of redeeming her. Palpatine's cackling echoed across the swampy planet. Yoda ignited his green lightsaber, causing his comrades to follow suit. The fight begins, and all 5 Force users begin swinging at full might. From the offset, it was clear that Yoda's age was taking a toll. He didn't move as fast as he did during his first fight with Sidious, and the Dark Lord instantly notes this. Obi-Wan assumed a defensive position in Form 3, as Luke and him began fighting Leia. She displayed her incredible talents, and both Jedi were incredibly amazed at how strong she had grown in such a short period of time. Leia created some room and blasted lightning, which Obi-Wan easily blocked, but Luke was hit and pushed back. Leia took advantage of this and fought harder than before, trying to out-staminate Kenobi, who played his defense like a master. But then he faltered, and Leia's speed was too much as she disarmed and killed Obi-Wan Kenobi. Luke screamed in pain, and Yoda felt his heart drop. Palpatine laughed, as he knew they were going to win. Yoda didn't last much longer, as he believed he needed to defeat the Emperor quickly so that he could help Luke, but this left him open to an attack, and Palpatine stabbed him in the chest. The light side pull of Dagobah began to turn, as Luke stood alone against the Emperor and Leia. Palpatine congratulated Leia, beaming that he was impressed with her strength, but then he told her she must prove herself worthy. Luke screamed in defiance. He told Leia that she didn't have to do this, that they were siblings, this wasn't right. At first, she remained fixated in evil, as Sidious continued to laugh in the corner. He ordered them to fight, to see who would become his true apprentice and rule the galaxy by his side. Leia began to fight Luke with no emotion, but Skywalker continued to speak to his sister. He reminded her of the story that Obi-Wan told them on the Falcon, how their father turned on their mother, but it was all because of this man, that if she continues down this path, she is just as bad as he is. Leia began to falter, but she kept moving strong, yelling at Luke to stop speaking, but the Chosen One's son didn't stop. He begged Leia to remember her parents, to remember the Organas, to think of what Padme must be thinking right now. Luke said they want her to defeat Palpatine and restore peace to the galaxy, not plunge it into darkness. That for her to remain in the dark would go against everything they stood for. Finally, Leia cracked and became overwhelmed with emotions. Sidious's face dropped as he sensed her turn. She quickly looked at Luke and said, "Let's finish this." They both leap at Sidious, who had to quickly ignite his saber to defend. Now, after 4 decades of being in a Skywalker's life, he was fighting both of Anakin's children at once, and he was losing. He fought hard to defend himself, but he had no way of providing any counterattacks. Eventually, their constant pressure wore him down, and both Jedi struck together, killing Emperor Palpatine. Leia collapsed into Luke's arms, tears pouring down her face. She looked at the bodies of Obi-Wan and Yoda. It was all her fault, she admitted. But Luke denied her thought, saying it was the Emperor. She had no choice. Once he decided she was his, it was over. But she still fought back and was able to come back to the light, like a true Jedi would. From here, the rebellion would be able to make a short campaign to Coruscant, where they seized the capital and took control of the Empire, restoring the Senate and the Republic. Luke chooses to rebuild the Jedi Order back on Coruscant, but makes the necessary amendments to the Jedi Code to ensure that attachments are allowed and encouraged, but there are proper teachings as to control, composure, and always maintaining one foot in the light. The Force ghosts of Obi-Wan and Yoda help Luke with early training in the Order. Eventually, Obi-Wan is able to commune with Anakin through the netherworld of the Force, and teach him how to become a Force ghost. As for Leia, she was traumatized by her time as a Sith and the people she hurt. As a result, she vowed to never use the Force again. She returns to the rebellion and eventually becomes a senator in the newly restored Senate. Han was freed from Carbonite and he and Leia got married, and Chewie was freed from slavery. And so, there was everlasting peace in the galaxy. Hey guys, the Fantasy Sabers Christmas sale is officially live, where all our deluxe replicas, including Anakin, Obi-Wan, Luke and Darth Vader, are the cheapest they've ever been, and the cheapest on any site in the market. We're also giving away a free The Chosen One Anakin Deluxe replica with orders over $250 USD cart value. This is the perfect opportunity to pick up a saber as a gift for your friend or family member, or if you've been thinking about grabbing one for yourself, this will be the last big sale we do until May next year, so now is the time. I will leave a link to the website in the description below, or type fantasysabers.com on Google. Thanks again, and back to the video. If you enjoyed today's video, you must watch What If the Kaminoans deleted Order 66, or What If Palpatine planted an inhibitor chip in Anakin. Please check out Fantasy Sabers if you're looking for an affordable saber to add to your collection. We offer RGB, Xenopixel or Profi in various sizes and designs. Also check out our membership program to be able to watch our videos early. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.